All right, our first speaker today. She was born in Detroit in 1949, and she is the middle of 5 children. She is the mother of a daughter and 3 teenage grandchildren. She is a lifelong experiencer, messenger, and participant in a hybrid project. Despite severe frustration and pain after failing to receive the support that she needed from her friends and family, she has nonetheless continued to reach out, hoping to be heard in a world she often feels she does not belong. Our next speaker is going to be talking about a lifetime of involvement with reptilian beings. So this is actually very cool. You usually don't hear a lot about reptilian beings, and when you do, it's usually not positive. This is going to be different, so this is very, very cool. But imagine going to your kids and going, "Hey, last night this big giant lizard guy hauled me onto a flying saucer." Okay, most families don't get along with that idea very well. So we're very glad to have her here to share her experiences. She has written a book, Symbiosis, A Love Beyond Space and Time. It is part of a process by which the reptilians are introducing themselves to humanity, and a powerful testament about the strength required to come out and share these kinds of experiences with one's family, friends, and the public in the face of resistance. Grant Cameron, world-recognized UFO researcher, who we'll see in a little while, winner of the Leeds Research Award by the UFO Congress, has published her book under his private publishing company. Dr. W. Chase and Michael Austin Melton have each contributed very important chapters to her book. She's appeared on many, many radio stations and radio shows, including Linda Moulton House Show, Open Minds TV, Aquarius Radio, Pyramids on Mars UFO Radio, Starborn Support Radio, radio stations in Winnipeg as well. Has YouTube videos out there, and she is currently working on her second book, which is going to be coming out this year. So join me in welcoming Nancy Tremain.
Okay. I am honored to be standing here, and I'm so grateful to all the hardworking people, the team that have created this forum for us to come together as a collective force, because it is in the sharing of our stories that we heal. I'm going to share a secret with all of you that I held inside for 50 years. Not just me, but several people of Novi, Michigan. It was as if a spell had been cast or a blanket had been thrown over us. It just simply wasn't spoken of for 50 years. Some of the things that I'm going to say are going to shock you. They're going to anger you. But most of all, they're going to make you wonder how and why so many of us were silenced for so long. It took half a century and a lot of people that I call the meant-to-bes, placed in my path to get me here on this stage. My dear friend T in New Zealand, who put up with me crying and helping me practice for my first speaking engagement, and went through a breakthrough. I had a minor breakdown. And Dr. Harry Wellness was the very first person that I told my story to after 50 years. He was a former MUFON state director for Michigan and a research ufologist for over 55 years, and I poured my heart out to this man. I told him all I could remember, and he brought in Vaughn Vowles as a regression therapist, a psychology professor, and regression therapist. And then Michael Melton gave me my first radio interview, and he encouraged me to finish writing my first book, and he helped me with editing, and he has a chapter at the end of the book, The Psychology of the Experiencer, the Inside and the Outside. And David Chase, who created this beautiful cover illustration that was put in my head. And David has also contributed a chapter to the end of the book. UFOs, reptilians, and the context of Nancy's experiences. And Sir Grant Cameron, who believed in me and took me under wing, and with his crew, Katerina Costello, Desta Barnaby, and Matt Lacasse, who all made this book possible. Symbiosis, a love beyond space and time. And thank you, audience, for being here with open minds and open ears. I am Nancy Tremain, born Detroit, Michigan, 1949, the middle of 5 children. My father was a hydraulic engineer in the aerospace division of Vickers Sperry Rand in Troy. He was also a World War II combat soldier, so our home was run like a boot camp. Spankings were common and often. Everything was routine, regiment, and discipline. We were perfect little soldiers to the outside world, but inside our house was filled with secrets and lies. My relationship with my mother was very strained. I always felt like that baby bird in the nest that the mother didn't want. I rebelled, and I ended up getting pregnant in high school by an older man who married me only to avoid going to prison. I resented the demands of a child, and I was a horrible mother. A selfish, horrible mother. And my life choices were very unhealthy. Now, this book was written through me by the collective and Mr. The words, the title, were all written through the melody and the words of the song, the prayer. I played the song every day, and somehow the words would just flow through me. I'm not a writer. And I would read the chapter, and I would go, wow, you wrote a good chapter. Now, I've told my story in the past couple of years, but never like I'll be able to tell it today, to a live audience with illustrations, pictures, videos. So I'm going to start where it began for me, and that was July of 1961 in the summer. It was shortly after 6 o'clock. My dad got home from work at 6:05 every night like clockwork, and it was summer vacation after the 6th grade. And Cindy was my girlfriend. We had met when we were 9 years old, and we were very close. And there was a direct view from my front door to her front door, so my dad could see that I made it safely to her house. And even though it was a beautiful summer day, we chose to play inside. And her father hollered for us to come outside. Now, back then, Novi was still a village, Novi, Michigan. It was all dirt roads, trees, and it was very unpopulated. Houses were just starting to be built. In fact, our home was one of the first homes built in the Willowbrook subdivision. When her father called for us to come outside, we heard the urgency in his voice. And as we walked out that front door, we had no idea that our worldview would be changed forever, and who we might have become will never be known. When we walked out the front door, there was a tree hovering above a tree between our 2 homes, a silver ship. It was totally silent, and it had a wide belt of red, green, and white lights in the center of it. And her father was adjusting. We didn't feel any fear. It was just awe. It was so beautiful against the blue sky. It didn't get dark till almost 9 o'clock. It was summer. And it was at least as large as my 3-bedroom ranch home, but twice as tall. And her father was adjusting a small tripod telescope, and he actually asked us if we wanted to look through it. And I wondered why. I mean, it's right there, it's right in front of us. What could he possibly be seeing that we weren't seeing? And then neighbors started to come out of the homes, and they were standing outside, and nobody said anything. You couldn't even hear anybody breathing. And we watched as a car started coming down. This is Meadowbrook Road. Now this is the home, the road that my home is on. It's a dirt road. And this car is coming towards us and underneath the ship. And I'm wondering, who is crazy enough? And why do they keep coming closer to the ship? And all of a sudden, a beam of light comes out of the bottom left-hand side of the ship, and it's aimed at the car, very slowly going down. And I'm wondering what's going to happen when it hits the car. And it hits the hood of the car. The car is totally immobilized. Now at this point, I start jumping up and down. I'm like doing jumping jacks. Over here, over here. I don't know what, I think it was mild hysteria. And my girlfriend Cindy is saying, stop it, stop it. And the ship tilted on its side, and it spoke to me, and it said 3 words: we see you. I grabbed the police officer's arm, and I said, do something. I don't know what I expected him to do. I mean, he had a gun. I don't know what I expected he could possibly have done. And when he looked down at me, it was the first time I'd ever seen fear in a man's face. The first time. And I knew at that moment that I would never feel safe in this world again. The next thing I knew, I was at home. My father was kneeling on the kitchen floor, and he was holding me very tightly. And I couldn't understand, nothing was making sense. And he's saying, you're home and you're safe, you're home and you're safe, honey. And I looked at the clock on the stove to the right, and it said 10 minutes to 9. Now, I was never allowed out past 7:30. I mean, never. And the kitchen door was open, and I could see that it was getting dark outside. And it didn't make sense that my dad wasn't spanking me. I couldn't understand it. At some point that night, I was silenced. But before my dad silenced me, he shared a secret with me that I was never to share, not even with my mother. And it would be 50 years before I would realize why and what the secret was and why he had shared it with me, because it would be of value to me in the future. When I say silence was enforced, I mean silence was enforced. He had me by the forearms and he was shaking me. Do you understand? You are not ever to talk about this. Do you understand? And I was crying and I said, yes, I understand, but I didn't. I didn't understand. Nothing made sense. I only knew that I had secrets that I had to store. And I had to store these secrets somewhere where no one could get to them, not even me. I couldn't make sense of how I got home and why I had such an intense longing for that ship to return, and why that night and so many nights after that I would stand on the headboard of my bed so that I could look out my bedroom window at that exact spot above the tree where the ship had hovered, and I would chant over and over again, please come back and get me. Please come back and get me. So for 50 years, from July of 1961 until September of 2011, it just was never spoken of. It was never spoken of. Not at home, not with friends, not with Cindy. I would draw a picture of it every year or so, and I would quickly discard it, but I did that for my sanity. I went to several therapists over the years, and I would beg each therapist, please hypnotize me. There's something inside me that has to come out. I actually referred to myself as scar tissue. Not one therapist would regress me. Either they didn't believe in it, insurance didn't cover it, and they wanted to give me drugs and a new diagnosis. I still suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder, panic attacks, severe anxiety, and depression. Cindy and I would reconnect over the half-century many times. And there were a couple of times where I'd try to get her to talk about it, and all I'd have to say is, Cindy, can we... And I don't really think I was ready. We both married multiple times to abusive men. Cindy attempted suicide quite a few times. She found comfort in alcohol and gambling, while I found comfort in men and drugs. Worth mentioning here is the fact that neither of us ever watched Star Wars, Star Trek, X-Files, or any of what we referred to as bullcrap, because we had seen reality. Healing begins when someone bears witness, and for me that was Dr. Harry Wellness, the former MUFON state director and researcher. He brought in Von Vowels as the regression therapist, and I lovingly referred to us as the Three Musketeers because we went through 5 regressions together. The first regression, I thought, this isn't going to work. I'm too smart. They're not going to be able to regress me. But I must have really been ready. I don't remember the first hour of that regression, but Vaughn said I was under, and I remembered nothing of it, but I vividly remember the last 4 or 5 minutes. I was frantically running home. And you can hear me in the regression. I'm out of breath, and I'm telling Vaughn, I'm running, I'm hauling ass, and I can run fast. They're going to get me. They're going to get me. Don't get me. Get Cindy, too. I don't want to be alone. And I knew how they were going to get me. I don't know how I knew how they were going to get me. They must have told me. But it was going to be with a shock in the back. And as I was running, I was waiting for that shock. And when that shock hit me, I was frozen in running position. I was locked like a cartoon character. I mean, totally frozen in that position. And the next thing I know, I'm on my back, and I'm in some kind of an energy wave, and the feeling is euphoric. I don't ever want to leave this wave, and I know I'm going up into the ship. And Vaughn's fighting to bring me out of the regression, and I'm fighting to stay in it because I don't want to leave this wave. And when he brings me out, I sit up and I say, it's real. It's really, really real. And so that's when I became Nancy Drew, and I started my investigation began. And I was on a journey of questions that I needed answered. And the first thing I was going to do is I was going to go after Cindy, that little girl who was with me, the 12-year-old girl who stood next to me. She was hardcore alcoholic at that time, and I prayed to God that when I got to her house, she'd be sober enough, and she was. And I had 3 illustrations at this time, and if I had to, I was going to shove them down her throat because she was going to talk. So when I got there, I said, Cindy, let's go into your bedroom. And I said, sit on the bed. And I think she knew what was coming. And I shut the bedroom door because I didn't want any interference. And I pulled out the first illustration, and she looked at it, and she said, what are you doing? And I thought, oh, no, you don't. If I have to tie you to this damn bed, you're going to look at these illustrations, and you're going to talk. And I pulled out the second illustration, and she said, it's exactly as I remember it. And when I got to the third illustration, she looked at it. She looked back at me. She looked at the illustration. She looked back at me, and she said, you were gone. We couldn't find you. I think my dad called your dad, or he went down to your dad's. And I'm saying, did she just say what I thought she said? I was gone. I was missing. Did she really say those words? And so, of course, my first question to her was the question I'd been asking myself for 50 years. Where did I say I had been when you first saw me? And without a second's hesitation, she said, outer space, certainly the words of a 12-year-old child. We held each other and we cried. We had both kept our secret for 50 years. I think it's the closest bonding I've ever felt with a human. At that moment, Cindy and I went into the living room then, and her husband Doug was sitting in a recliner watching TV, and I said, Doug, please turn off the TV. Cindy and I have to talk to you. We had tears and snot running down our face. Cindy sat in the recliner across from Doug, and I knelt down before him with the illustrations. And I couldn't believe they'd been married for like 18 years, and she'd never mentioned any of this to him. And I said, we're going to tell you something. And Cindy's yelling, and it's true, and it's true. And I showed him the illustrations, and we told him everything we could remember at that point, and he believed every word we said. And he became obsessed with ufology after that. He died a couple years later. But during that 2-year period, he was obsessed. Now, when there are regressions done, there's no order to regressions. I can't be led easily. So you never know what's going to come out once you regressed. And during this regression, the first thing I said was, no one's ever going to believe this. No one's ever going to believe this. And Vaughn said, where are you? And I said, I'm on the ship. I had just run past the pilot, who looked just like anyone's father. And I wasn't afraid. I was a 12-year-old kid. And I'm standing in the middle of the ship, and it's empty. And I said, and I don't know if I said it out loud or if I just thought it in my head, but I said, I can't believe I'm on a flying saucer. And the pilot said, it's a ship. So I ran to the window, and this is me inside the ship. And this, what we had seen, the red, green, and white lights outside, from the inside of the ship was nothing but windows that ran the entire circumference of the ship. And I was so tiny, I had to stand on my tiptoes to see outside. I wanted to see where we had been standing. And there's the tree. We were still hovering above the tree. Now, this is important here. There was no one there. The police are gone. The neighbors were gone. The police car's gone. Everybody's gone. Cindy's gone. Only person there is Mr. Lutz and the telescope. And I'm yelling, "I'm up here, Mr. Lutz." And the reason this is important is because I would find out about a year ago where everyone was. So when Mr. has, this is how oops. When I said, "I can't believe I'm on a flying saucer," and Mr. said, "It's a ship." That's how he got his name. I said, "Mister, this can't be a ship. Because a ship goes in the water. And a ship is what Captain Hook was on." And he said, "Oh, but this does go in the water." So that is how he got his name, Mr. Not M-I-S-T-E-R, but M-R period with respect. The next thing I remember is I'm on a middle table and I'm naked, but I see Cindy and she's in this cylindrical clear tube, and we make eye contact, and she had beautiful blue eyes, and I felt such comfort. They had brought her on. I said, "Get Cindy too," and they did. And she was in what I call a holding cell. And then they tell me that they want to see inside me. And they did a laparoscopy, which didn't exist in 1961. And the reason that they told me they wanted to see inside me is because I never would have understood that they were harvesting eggs. A 12-year-old child could understand that they wanted to see inside me. Then they placed a smooth, cylindrical rod in my right hand, and I knew instinctively to curl my fingers around it because I knew it contained something. They were giving me something. And it's only after I drew this illustration, you see, they put these illustrations in my head like the old slide projectors, and they take them out. And they do them over and over again until I put them to paper. Their eyes are all looking at the same spot. They're looking at a monitor on the wall. They are monitoring what they are putting, the information they are giving me. And I'm given a message that I attach to this illustration, and the message is, take this baton and run with it. Be an ambassador. It sounded so self-serving that I was actually embarrassed to tell people that. As the doctors left the room, I call them doctors, they were the little grays. They probably stood about 3.5 feet. As they left the room, there were 2 large silver, heavy metal doors. And as they slid together, the room became totally seamless. Also worth mentioning is that all the instruments that they use are in the wall, and they're retractable. And when they go back into the wall, it's flush. Now stay with me here, because 2 days after this regression, Mr. put these words in my head, that he was going to let me remember how it really was on the ship, not the way I perceived it, the way I had perceived painful tests. And I'm going to play a short, I think it's 1 minute and 30 seconds. It's the conversation. I didn't talk about the nice one. I should probably go back. This is the nice one. She was the female on board, and she showed me love and compassion. She helped me get dressed. She babied me. She had human eyes. She had very straggly, thin hair. She was a woman. And it wasn't that the doctors were mean. They were just doing their job. So now she walked me back to the pilot, and this is what really happened.
I was then taken forward in time to the nice one. She was the female on board because they didn't want to take me through the laparoscopy again. And she helped me get dressed, and she walked me back to the pilot. And as I approached him, I was confused and I was angry. I said, "Mister, why did you let them hurt me?" And he said, "Your pain was perceived." And then I was infuriated. He told me to learn to expand my perception and find the positives in each perception. If we are abused, then we will perceive our reality as a negative. Through love, we are able to perceive our reality and find that it is so. Everything and everybody is peripheral to our universe and our reality. If we can conquer the concept that we are all part of one energy, the concept of unity becomes obvious to us, and we no longer fear the unknown death, because whatever we are always who we are. Turn on all your positive sensors. Believe in your ability to grow and change. And then he put these words in my head, and he told me to put them to paper. All memories are packed and taken with us in each new life. When the load becomes too heavy, we travel or become, and he put quotations, light knowledge energy.
Now Mr. had become my teacher. And I started to receive messages. And these are 3 of the first messages that were given to me. And I still receive messages. You ask who we are. You have only to look in the mirror. We are you. We are all one. Whatever we are always who we are, meaning our consciousness is always our consciousness. Our messages are not meant for everyone. Many will be left behind. Then I was directed to the computer to read an Einstein quote. Great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. Now, I know that he wanted me to see this so that I would be prepared for the obstacles and the bullying and harassment that I still overcome every day. I've lost most of my family, my grandchildren. I have welcomed Mr. and the collective mind. Their presence has helped me heal, and it has brought many important people into my life. So my next step in my investigation was to find a fellow classmate from decades ago from Novi, Michigan. And I sent him my phone number, and he called me, and I asked him if he remembered an incident in 1961, and I don't believe he lived in Novi at that time, but he told me, if you want any information, all you have to do is find former police chief Lee Begall. He'll have all the answers. So I went to Google, and I put Police Chief Lee Begall, Novi, Michigan, and poof, up popped that the following day, now remember this is 50 years, the following day there was going to be a street naming ceremony in his name. And I was thinking, tick-tock, He was 91 years old. Time was running out. So I quickly put together a letter to the chief, and I'll just read portions of it so you get an idea what I wrote to him. Dear Chief Begall, I believe and I hope that you can answer some questions that have haunted me for many years. There was a UFO in Novi in the early 60s. The craft hovered silently above a tree. There was an interaction between a car and the craft. I spent much of that night staring out of my bedroom window, waiting for it to return. My parents hoped I would forget. I never talked about it, but I never forgot. It was always in the back of my mind. There was no police report, which caused me, and I'm sure many others, to doubt their sanity. This event has affected me for 50 years. I Googled your name, and to my amazement, you will be having a street named in your honor tomorrow. Now tell me this isn't a coincidence. Of course, I will be there to hand you this letter. So I thought I got there early, but there was a mob. There were police officers from surrounding cities. This is Chief Begall. Looks pretty good for 91, and his mind is sharp. When I got there, I just saw this mob of people, and I just was looking all over. I had to see him. I had to find him. I had this letter. I had to get to him. And I got angry. I didn't care. I fought my way through that mob, and he was in the middle of a conversation with a man, and there was a line of people waiting to talk to him. I didn't care. I jumped right in and I said, Chief Begall, I'm Nancy Shinchik Tremain. We moved to Novi in the 50s. Our home was one of the first homes in Willowbrook subdivision. And he took my letter, and I got dirty looks from everyone around me. I didn't care. I got the letter to him. And he started to open it. And I said, no, not, wait till you get home. So as I was driving home, I was praying to God, please call me, please call me. Well, it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks, which seemed like 2 years. And he called. And the first thing he did was he thanked me for the letter. And quote, these are his words. You're not crazy. It really happened. I personally took phone calls for over 20 minutes. I believe the car you saw immobilized was one of my own officers, Martin Cohn. He called from the two-way radio stating, strange object overhead. And I thought to myself, now what's wrong with that man? He was in an unmarked car patrolling a nearby area under construction. Martin Cohn said, send cars. After that conversation, I believe I was programmed to keep a record of every single thing that happened, and I do every day. Record every phone conversation, save every email, and I still do it to this day. Memories started to surface. The first memory that came to me was that secret that my father had shared with me in 1961. He told me, and I must have spoken with my father about the aliens on board. I don't remember, but I must have, because this is the secret he shared with me. He said that there was an alien that had been captured by the government, and it was nicknamed Skinny Bob. And it angered me so, even at 12 years old. The words captured and Skinny Bob. We have always been bullies. Always. Name-calling bullies. The next thing I remembered was that they sent my father to the only business trip he ever took. Ever. He was sent to California, where they offered him a job opportunity in Australia. He turned them down. And most recently, I remembered my mother taking me to stay with complete strangers after that incident to get me out of Novi until things had settled down. Now this is an image. Like I said, they put these images in my head until I draw them. And this image was given to me between my third and fourth regression. And after I drew it, I was told to write beneath it, "See me as I am." And I took my illustrations with me to a couple of MUFON meetings. Harry Wellness thought it would be a good idea for me to go to a couple of MUFON meetings and find other people, other experiencers. And I got the same response from everyone. It's a reptilian? I said, well, I guess. A draconian reptilian. Do you know how evil they are? They even eat babies. Anybody in the audience had a baby eaten by a reptilian? I didn't think so. I also attended an abductee group who would tell me the same things about how evil they were. I thought it was funny because none of them had ever had any experiences with a reptilian being, yet they had all these answers. Judgmental humanity based on appearance. The very thing I am trying to teach us and myself to unlearn. You know, I might not be pleased with all the tests and the things that I'm put through, but I wasn't pleased when my parents took me to the dentist to have cavities filled, or inoculations, or my tonsils out when I was 4. So sometimes things that are good for us don't always feel good. Mr. is 7 to 8 feet tall. He is green, brown in color. He has scales. He has a large, heavy tail that rests on the floor. And his feet are like alligator feet. He has 3 fingers and a thumb. He's built more like a baseball player than a football player. He has amber eyes. No prominent features, just a slit for a mouth. But he exudes love and power and leadership. And he is a very, very proud creature. And he is respected. He has told me he is respected by all species of aliens. And I know that I belong to him. We have a symbiotic relationship, a mutually beneficial relationship between 2 different organisms. We have always been together. Now, this is the only time I've ever seen Mr. in physical form of the reptilian. One time. That was when I was 3 years old. This was my first memory of being with Mr. and my most frightening. We were seated on a long cement bench with a vast blue sky, and we were outside. We were not in a ship. We were outside. And we were on a balcony, and I could tell that we were up high. And I remember staring at his face, and I could see the scales pulling from their foundation. And at 3 years old, the only word I could think of was icky, icky. And I could feel that he felt my thoughts. And I believe that's why I never see him in that form anymore. But he walked me to the edge of the balcony, and as I looked over, I was horrified, horrified. there was a large cement tank, and it was divided into 3 sections. And in each section, there was a horrific-looking sea creature. And Mr. told me that I had to choose one of these sections, and I had to swim from one side to the other. And I said, no, I don't know how to swim. I can't do that. No. He said, you must. And I knew no matter which section I chose, I was going to be eaten. But the one on the far right it was smooth, and it had some slight color to it. It was the only one that had color. It had orange color to it. So I wanted to perceive it as a goldfish. So I chose that one. And Mr. could see how very upset I was. And he said to me, Nancy, this is just a vision. It's just a vision. They were studying the emotion of fear, which is one of the emotions that they study. And they needed to know which one I feared the least. Not the most, but the least. And my regression therapist was very unsettled. And he said to me, do you understand at the deepest level what a brave little girl you are? And I said, yes, but this is how they learn. I have to help others lose fear. Because without fear, we would never know courage. Shortly after this, I was told by Mr. You were an abductee, then an experiencer, and now you are a participant. It wasn't important that Vaughn, my regression therapist, agree or accept my relationship with Mr. What was important was that he understood that I had a mission that I had signed up for. In Dr. John Mack's book, Human Encounters with Aliens, he says, sometimes our most useful spiritual learning come at the hands of rough teachers as the boundaries of consciousness are breached and we are open to new domains of existence. Now I'm going to really tread, if anybody's read the book, I'm going to tread very lightly on this chapter, but it's very important because it makes people uncomfortable because it has to deal with sex. I met a man January 7th, 2012. I'll call him Sid. It's an acronym for someone I dated. A 6'6" prison guard. So you can imagine what we look like together. You know, I think I'm 100 pounds maybe. He had never heard of Betty and Barney Hill. He had never heard of the movie Close Encounters. And every time I would try to speak of experiences or ufology, he would literally fight to stay awake. And I finally came to understand that they were causing him to shut me out. There was a sexual chemistry between the two of us that was so intense that I can't even put it into words. And I go into detail in the book. I don't leave any of the details out because they are important. And I'm not ashamed and I'm not embarrassed because I didn't do anything wrong. But this dominated my life for 14 months. So I couldn't omit something to make other people comfortable. I didn't realize it at the time, but they were now studying the emotions of sexual empathy through me, or sexual desire, sexual pleasure. So 1 month after meeting Sid, I had to admit myself to the hospital emergency room. my heart wouldn't stop racing. It was like when you put your foot down on the gas pedal and you just hold it there. So that was the first of 4 hospital visits and 1 ambulance ride that I had while I was with this man. I still have trouble understanding people's discomfort with this topic. If I had said that I had found sexual pleasure with a tall blonde Nordic, people would go, "Aw." You know, we can talk about beheadings, we can talk about rape, molestation, but sexual pleasure makes people uncomfortable. Anyway, the hospital did an MRI, an EKG, an EEG, a heart cath, which is a very invasive procedure. Even my cholesterol was perfect. They couldn't find one single thing wrong with me. They did every test you can imagine except one test they didn't do, pregnancy test. Why would they? I was 62 years old, but I was pregnant. I was pregnant from February 2nd, 2012 until April 15th, 2012, today. What are the odds? Synchronicity again. Now, I say he was removed, not born, because they took him at about, and I look humongous there, but when you're my size, that was big. And I say removed because he wasn't fully developed. They take them at about 2.5, maybe 3 months, and then they finish the developmental process on board. So I was pregnant exactly 10 weeks and 3 days. And this was taken a week before he was removed. And I hid my pregnancy from everyone, except Sid, my best friend Tom, who said, "What's up with your stomach?" And I lifted my shirt and I said, "I'm pregnant." Now, Tom is a lawyer, and he's a very serious, very quiet, laid back, easy, just... And he didn't know what to say. We've been best friends for like 30 years, and he said, well, you better stop being pregnant. And Cindy and her husband knew I was pregnant. When I was there, Cindy was making fun of my stomach. And I said, "I'm pregnant." And after I left, Doug said to her husband, "Nancy's pregnant." He knew. I always knew that Drax, they gave me the name of my son. I always knew he wasn't mine to keep. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to be taking him with me to the grocery store. The first time I got to meet Sid was 2 months later. It was in June of 2012, and I was on board ship. And this beautiful woman holding Sid, I recognized as mine, as my child, my daughter, Faylene, from what I thought was a false pregnancy in the late 1980s. And she wanted me to hold Drax. Even though he was swaddled in a blanket, I could tell that his head was large and misshapen, and his back was hunched, and I didn't want to hold him. I wouldn't even make eye contact with him because I knew he was telepathic, and he would see me and feel my displeasure at him. I felt Faylene's pity and sadness for Drax. I was quickly returned home, where I cried and begged them to please give me another chance. I promised to love him. And these words were placed in my head by Mr. Drax is exactly as he is meant to be, a gentle, loving being who will make many wise decisions. He is a thinker. a judge of sorts, as every society needs judges. I understand now that they are creating several different groups of beings that will inhabit the new earth, and thinkers are just one of the several groups. October 10th, 2012. I was putting on makeup, and I saw these red, infected, raised-looking scratch marks. I couldn't believe it. I called Dr. Wellness, and I was hysterical. Oh, my God, oh, my God. I took my index finger, and I went to touch. There was no feeling, nothing. It was a hologram. Absolutely no feeling. And Dr. Wellness said, get pictures and get them quickly, because those scratches are going to disappear very quickly. And I wondered how and why he would say such a thing. That was 4 hours later. And that's as close as the camera could get. I kept asking them, what are those marks? What were they? What were they? I had to know. And they always answer. I always get an answer. Sometimes not what I want. It might be a year later, but I was lucky. I was given this image to draw. I had bonded with my son. Now it's January 28th, 2013. I wake up. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. I've got my first cup of coffee, and I pull back my living room curtains, and I see this. This picture was taken actually from my bedroom window. And I'm going to play a very short video. I think it's 4.5 minutes long. It was done by Kin Parsons in the UK, the British Earth Aerial Mystery Society. These marks or tracks or whatever they are, footprints are starting to melt. I want to get a close-up so that maybe somebody has seen something like this before. Here's the ones going to the bedroom window. What the hell are they? They're almost circular. I wanted to put a date. It's January 28th, 2013. And these were here this morning. These, whatever they are, footprints. I just wanted to put a date to them. I don't know, between this and the wet car, there is something. Now, there was no way that doubt was not going to creep into my mind with so much negativity being hurled at me. Sometimes the battle seemed futile. I had to at least entertain and do some research. But I found an article by Gwen Farrell titled, "How Belief Systems Affect ET Experiencers." There are two types of experiencers. The first ones, they feel like it's a roller coaster ride and they can't wait to get back on. They feel blessed, guided, protected, and given the choice, we would never return to Earth. The second group uses words like rape, helplessness, and they usually wind up in the therapist's office trying to forget. The positive or negative assessment is determined by our perception, not the actions of the ETs. As long as we can accept and take our power, we can face past, future experiences without fear or anger. Had I listened to people's negativity, my mission would have been lost. This is July 2nd, 2015. This is former Police Chief Lee Begall's 95th surprise birthday party. And he wanted to know how I found out about the party, and I couldn't tell him that I had Googled his obituary because I hadn't heard from him for a while. He was in great spirits that day. He was very mentally alert. He got up and stood at the podium, and he had the crowd laughing as he told stories of Novi, not the one of 61, of course. But I noticed on the agenda that retired police captain Dick Faulkner, one of Cindy, you remember my friend Cindy from 1961 that stood with me, one of Cindy's former brother-in-laws from the 1970s. She was married to his youngest brother, Warren. Now, this is him in the back, and we'll be doing a little talking about this man. During this party, Police Chief Begall told me not once, but twice, that Dick Faulkner was on duty that night in 1961, which put him at the scene, standing with us. Faulkner's first day on the job as a police officer was July 20th, 1961, and this incident happened, I have it narrowed down now to a 3-day period, July 26th, 27th, or 28th. So he'd only been on duty for a week. I was recording my conversation with Chief Begall at the party. It was a private conversation. And Faulkner, I look up and Faulkner is standing behind Chief Begall, staring at my recorder like I'm holding a loaded pistol. And Chief Begall said the word UFO. And Dick slaps the chief on the back and he says, "UFO? You shot it down, didn't you, Chief?" And he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, "We buried it," meaning the topic. Oh, no, we didn't. There he is. That's his first day on the job. I found that in the Novi news articles. The only comfort the people of Novi got after that incident was a church sermon that following Sunday titled "The Martian Question." The minister had written, "Something to think about. If there are intelligent creatures on some other planet, yours or mine, we may someday meet them. What sort of people would you hope these Martians to be? Wouldn't it be heartening to find a planet with the world of churches of faith and folks that work for the truth revealed to them by God. Something to think about next Sunday. So that was all we got. But I couldn't wait to get home so that I could do some research on Faulkner. Wondered why he didn't want to talk about it, why he wanted to shut me up. I realized that I had the information when he became, it was 86 when he became FBI, 1986. And I also believe that he was embarrassed because I'd had a conversation with Chief Begall prior to this. And we were joking about the incident in 1961. I talked to him quite frequently. And I said, it must have scared the poop out of the cops when they saw Martin Cohen's car immobilized. And he said, yeah, they got in their car and took off. So that's why when I looked out the window, there was no one standing there. The police had taken off and left two little 12-year-old girls. And the neighbors went in their homes. The only man brave enough to be standing there was Cindy's father with his telescope. Now, Begall knew and still knows that I record our phone calls. And sometimes his answers are guarded. He had graduated from the University of Western Ontario pre-law, and he'd passed the bar exam from the University of Detroit. So he has a cop lawyer mentality. But after that 95th birthday party, our relationship changed. And he no longer saw me as that little 12-year-old girl that he'd been talking to on the phone. I told him how much I feared him passing, and I knew he had information that I needed. And I said, please don't do that, Chief. Don't take that information with you. Don't do that. So these are his words as I have tape recorded them, and I have transcribed them. Quote, they came in from the Air Force, Arizona or New Mexico. They were government, doing an official investigation. They came in prepared to disbelieve everybody, because things like that don't happen. But they do, don't they, Nancy? They knew how to talk. They wanted to talk to everyone. They didn't want to start a panic. I believe your father made a mistake in not letting them talk to you. I had to remind him I was 12 years old. He said, you're a big girl now, and you can tell your story. My most spiritual experience was on board ship with Mr. in 2015, where I witnessed several angels, each representing a distinct group of beings. There was no division of race. I felt a love not found on this planet. They were all working together in harmony, working for the good of this planet, to save this planet. And I was given this message. We are benevolent beings. We are here to help save the planet. If this makes us angels, then we are. Since humanity began keeping records, legends of the reptilians and their participation in the creation of man has continued. But as long as they remain a politically incorrect species, we will have no chance of unity. They are just like us. They are us. They are researchers, teachers. They are geneticists, scientists. They are watching over our evolution, and they are studying the emotions of fear, rage, love, anxiety, and yes, sexual pleasure, and empathy. And they study these emotions through me via the pineal gland, also known as the third eye, the seat of the soul, the place where all thoughts are formed. Dr. Sarah Conrath, PhD in social psychology from the University of Michigan, did a study of 14,000 students over a 20-year period to find that students of today are 40% lower in empathy than the counterparts of 20 years ago. Now, this is alarming. I'm going to say it again. 40% lower in empathy. A species cannot and will not survive without empathy. As Mr. and the collective have told me, we are not alien to Earth or any planet, as we have always been here. Are they playing God? How long has humanity been playing God? Hunting and killing animals for sport? Are inhumane methods used to kill animals for food? Clubbing baby seals, bullfighting. The only fight is the bull's fight to live. Win or lose, he's murdered. To a jeering mob. And it wasn't so long ago that doctors did experiments on the poor, prisoners, racial minorities, and mentally handicapped. They were exposed to chemical, biological weapons, radiation, mind-altering drugs, all in the name of science. First, do no harm, the hypocritical oath. I'd love to tell you a quote from David Chase, who has a chapter in this book. He's a researcher of reptilians for decades, very knowledgeable man I respect. And this is his quote: "It is high time for us to be thinking about reptilian aliens from the perspective of biologists and anthropologists rather than that of conspiracy theorists. The biological perspective has always been the natural place to start when thinking about any species of life." When people ask me if my post-traumatic stress disorder and panic attacks, depression are from my experiences, I tell you no. It was in the keeping of the secrets. What humanity has done to me is far worse than anything I have ever experienced with these loving beings. When people ask me if there were pictures taken in 1961, I have to laugh. Of course there were. The ship hovered for over 20 minutes against a clear blue sky, and Cindy's father was adjusting a tripod. Yeah, there were pictures taken, and there were people who came in and took those pictures. In July of 2017, I sent an email to one of the people at the Detroit Historical Society because I thought, wow, I've got a living police chief who's talking about a full military investigation done in 1961. This is important stuff, right? He never got back to me. Don't know me. So I made the letter, and I sent it to every entire staff member at the Detroit Historical Society. And I wrote to them. I was silent for 50 years, and I'm not going to shut up until my last breath. Acknowledgement of receiving this email would be nice since you have chosen to ignore me. Bagal's time is limited, and his information is groundbreaking. Pretending I don't exist isn't going to make me go away. I thought they would have jumped at this chance, especially since the year prior they had done an interview with Chief Bagal regarding the 1967 riots of Detroit and his time spent in 2 world wars. So on September 26, 2017, I got a phone call from someone who said he was going to do the interview. He told me his name was Billy Winkle. I said, please repeat that, Billy Winkle. They sent a 25-year-old man who didn't quite fit the description one would expect. When he arrived, Chief Begall asked him for his business card, and he said he didn't have one. I could see Begall's irritation. He said, write down your credentials. He said, can I borrow a pen and paper? The chief said, you come to interview me with no business card, no pen and paper. He didn't even have a camera. And the only picture that was taken was by me, and it's an awful picture, but at least I got one. All he came with was a tape recorder, which he laid down in front of the chief, and I took my tape recorder and bammed it down next to his, looking him straight in the eyes like, I guess I'll have to take over from here. So I conducted the entire interview. As the interviewer was leaving, Chief Begall yelled, Nancy should be a private investigator. But he just kept walking out the door. He didn't say a word. I've written them several times. When are you going to post that? When are you going to post that interview? No response. But that's okay, because even if they did post it, they'd cut so much of it out it would be worthless. But I happen to have it on 2 separate tape recorders. I've got it. I couldn't understand how and why they sent someone so unprepared, so uninformed, so disinterested. Then I did some research on Billy Winkle to find that one of his favorite quotes is, and I'll let you be the judge of this. This is his favorite quote, folks. People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. This is a universal vision that was put in my head over and over again, and it's me standing amid every ship, orb, rod of every different size and shape and color. And my feeling is gratitude, and I keep saying, thank you, thank you. They are all light knowledge energy beings, and they are programmed to process and forward information. I sent this illustration and a small email to Ann Eller, the author of Dragon in the Sky, who also worked with Dr. J. Allen Hynek for a short period of time before he died. And she got back to me the same day, and she said, that's a universal vision, a universal dream. Many have seen it, and it will happen. And how nice to know that Drax will be a wise judge, because we certainly need one. This is Cindy. This is me and Cindy. This was taken in the 80s. I have a lot of pictures of the two of us, but I love this one. On August 5th, 2015, Cindy was discovered dead on her kitchen floor, where she had laid for 2 or 3 days with her dog Lucy by her side. Cindy was the other little girl in 1961. She lived it. She understood it. She was on that ship with me. And she should be standing here with me today. But I feel her here. When she died, part of me died. The next day I went for a walk behind my apartment in the park, crying hysterically. And all of a sudden it turned to anger. And I said, I will never forgive you for this. You finally drank yourself to death. This was our story to tell. Now I'm all alone. I have no one. And I received these words from Cindy. Those men, they came to your house. They wanted to talk to you. Your father threatened to kill them. Cindy had a regression 10 months before she died in my apartment, on my couch where I had 4 of my 5 regressions, with my regression therapist. And I recorded it. And it is transcribed in the book. This happens to be a woman by the name of Mrs. Florence McDermott. This was another UFO sighting in 1972 in Novi. She was hanging out her wash. Was seen by 4 people. There was a police report made this time. What's ironic about this is her grandson's name is Bill McDermott, and I went to elementary, junior, and high school with him, and was just at a class reunion with him a couple years ago. And I posted this on Facebook, and he said, Nancy, that's my grandma. So she says she's a teetotaler and never touches a drink. She's a Baptist woman, and she wanted them to know she was telling the truth. And she said she had to ask herself if she really was after she saw the first ship. Because there were 3, they came one at a time. She ran next door to her neighbor, who happened to be her daughter-in-law, and her daughter-in-law was teasing her, "Oh, what you been drinking?" And then came the second one. And then 2 more people joined, a man and a teenage boy. And the third UFO flew right over her house. And I'd like to read a quote by Rainier Maria Rilke. That is at bottom the only courage that is demanded of us, to have courage for the most strange, the most singular, and the most inexplicable that we may encounter. End quote. No one should ever have to suffer in silence or fear being ridiculed. No one. We all deserve to be heard. My mission is not to convince you. It is to inform you. I pray when you hear the word reptilian that you won't attach it to the word fear any longer. And I hope that what I have shown you is how I see them as my friends, parents, teachers, and yes, sometimes they are sexual beings. So thank you all for listening to me.